Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is match day review time. It is Sunday morning. We are armed with a coffee, Andy Thompson mug, Terrace Life. Go and check out that website, a bit of advertising. And I'm joined, as always, by Reese from German Gills. You are all following, so I'm not going to tell you to go and do it. And I'm pleased to say that I'm also joined by Accrington Stanley fan and son of former director, I have been reliably informed, Gary Domain, and you can find him on Twitter at Dog. Do not ask why. I will put his description in the details at the bottom of the video, so go and give him a follow for all your Accrington stuff. First of all, gents, appreciate you both coming to join me on a Sunday morning. Reese, I know you've got to go out today, so we shall crack straight on. As always, we will go back to 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon when the team news came out for both sides. Gills lined up in a 4-2-3-1/4-4-2, depending with or without the ball. And it was Jake Turner returning in goal. It was a back four of Robbie McKenzie, Max Emer, Shadrach Ogie, and the returning Scott Malone. Tim Dieng and Sean Williams came back into the lineup to anchor the midfield. Dom Jeffries and Johnny Williams were operating from the sides, and it was a pairing of Tom Nichols and Ashley Nadersson. We will talk about them shortly. Paired up front for our opponents. John Coleman went with 4-2-3-1/4-1-4-1 system. Toby Savin was the goalkeeper. Back four was Mella Bagaloo, I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's right.
Gills, Quirk. It was then Seamus Corneli was tasked with anchoring that midfield and protecting that back four. In front of him, it was Nolan Coyle, Liam McConville, and it was young Josh Andrews on loan from Birmingham City who was leading the line. I'm going to come to you first, Gary. No surprises with the lineup, I assume. I spoke to Tony, who does the Across the Pitch podcast in the preview show, and he seemed to think it'd be a 4-2-3-1/4-1-4-1, and that was the case.
Yeah, I think most people who sort of tried to predict the team would have perhaps maybe been one player out, but based on the back end of pre-season and the sort of the last two games, that's kind of the team that's picking itself to start at the moment. Some people would like to see some of the other guys who came on later maybe starting. You might have expected Sean Worley to start some games, but you know, him and Sean McConville both getting a bit older now. I think the view is if we use them sparingly and a bit more economically through the season, we're going to get the best out of them for, you know, maybe 2 or 3 more seasons, considering their age, which is 20 years younger than I am, but we're classing them as old men. So we do apologise to those two for that. But yeah, pretty much standard fare for an away game and standard fare for the starting lineup as it stands.
Excellent. And just before I come to you, Reece, Gary, I want to ask you about this because Tony reliably informed me that your dad was a director back in the non-league days. So can you just tell us about that? What was that like? Obviously growing up around a football club, I assume, and watching the club rise and rise and rise, which is what they did to where they are now. I know they got relegated out of League One last season, but that is the only relegation certainly in John Coleman's reign. So it must have been sort of a fun journey as a young boy and a man growing up.
Absolutely. I mean, my dad used to watch the original Accrington Stanley before they went out of business in the 60s. And he then went to watch Burnley for a few years. Always had a good interest in football. It was always on the telly in our house. I always played as a kid as well. And then when Accrington, they reformed in sort of 1968, started playing again in 1970. And it was a good 21 years, I think, before my dad's next involvement. We got to the first round proper of the FA Cup. We played Crewe, and it had to be held at Ewood Park because we couldn't hold the 10,000 fans who were going to watch the game at the Crown Ground at the time. I think it held about 2,500 or something, and that just sparked the connection again. He was, you know, sort of going in the sports bar after, chatting to people. They needed some help behind the scenes. Probably needed some money as well, which was usually the case in those days. So my dad stepped in, became commercial director. So his role was, you know, as a volunteer. In fact, it cost him money, to be quite honest. And he would do things like, you know, sort of set up raffles. He were always getting bundles of raffle tickets to take to work and they'd have the weekly draw, all the usual things you have with a small club. He was constantly writing letters. You never saw him. He was either away at weekends because we were playing away, or if he was at home, the game would be on, then there'd be some sort of function in the evening that he'd organise. So it's very, intensive. I was in my sort of 20s by this time, so I tended to play myself in local leagues at the weekend. So I'd go to the odd Stanley game at the time, but it was only when I gave up, sort of in my 30s, that I became a season ticket holder, and that's sort of like the last 20 odd years really I've been doing that. But yeah, no, there was he was very discreet. I think Tony had me on his podcast once where I think he was hoping I could come up with some great stories about the behind the scenes stuff. My dad never said anything. You could tell when he was annoyed at times, but there was never any sort of this has gone on, that's gone on. A lot of other people did who were behind the scenes, but yeah, he was very discreet, and I think he was, he's seen by those around at the time as one of the key people who helped push that final push from a good non-league side into the Conference League, and then finally promotion. It was all sort of that team of people who finally took them over those final couple of hurdles to get us full time again, and then get us back into league football.
That's excellent. Seeing like someone, obviously family member that played a small part in the journey and getting them to where they are today as an established football league club, which is brilliant. So I appreciate you sort of giving us a little bit of information, but maybe not as much as you might have thought you got at the time, because your dad was very much keeping his cards close to his chest.
Yeah.
Reece, let's come to you, the Gills team. We went off on a little tangent there, but I wanted to ask that question because we all know about the milk advert back in the 80s. And
of course,
Accrington Stanley, who are they? And I think everybody does know a lot more about Accrington Stanley now because of the work of people like Gary's father. Gills lined up 4-2-3-1/4-4-2. No real surprises based on what we've seen through pre-season because of no Ollie Hawkins. One question I want to ask you. Max Clark can find himself very unfortunate to not even be in the 18 after a very good performance on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was surprised actually, because weren't they shouting for him for man of the match? He got into the team of the week, didn't he, on Tuesday as well? Which I thought
he got in. Him and Neil Harris were in the team of the round, for the Carabao Cup.
But you know what that says? It just goes to show. I don't think it was injured. It just goes to show either he's taking a little bit of a rest, but we've either got an opportunity to take a rest to rotate, or the competition is so fierce that he has to be his absolute best to get into a really strong squad. Like so. And when's the last time we've had a problem like that? It seems.
I said this to Luke at the start of the match day live. Like we was doing our bit before the thing, and I had my camera up, and the substitutes were warming up directly behind us, and we both sort of turned around and just smiled at each other and went, "That's our subs bench." Like Glenn Morris, Shay Alexander, who won goal of the season. Glenn Morris won player of the season last season. Connor Masterson, one of the best centre backs in the league. George Lapsley, Macaulay Bonne. It was Ethan Coleman, who was brilliant on Tuesday against essentially a Premier League side. Jaden Clark, up and coming. It was just so good to see. It was such a good thing, and it was. I think when there was a tweet, I retweeted one of Gillingham substitutes against Southampton on Tuesday, and I can't believe it was like Williams coming on, Malone coming off, and it was just all 6 players had a huge impact overall. They were just quality. And I just don't remember it being ever like that. It was always the subs coming on with people that were just trying to hold the game out, and we could give 15 minutes just for fresh legs. But actually, we've got players that can come on the pitch that can give her impetus in games. And for Max not to get into the team kind of highlights that point really, really well. Absolutely. And it's like you say, it's just brilliant. We seem to have 2 good options in every position, where if you take someone out and replace them, there's no drop off in quality. To be fair, there was no drop off in quality last season. They were just all crap.
Yeah, it was like for like at that kind of level, absolutely, yeah.
We have to joke because it was an appalling first half of the season, Gary. I'm sure you were very well aware of our goal scoring prowess from sort of August to December of 2022. So
we've nearly met that tally already, I think.
I think we worked out on the way home from the game yesterday. It took us till the middle of September to get to 6 points last season.
Yeah,
and we've done it in 180 minutes of football. It's crazy. Just to sort of. Before we get into sort of the timeline of the game, I just want to quickly say to me, it felt like, and Gary can jump on me and disagree here, it felt like if you just looked at the stats of the game on apps or websites, aside from total shots, which was 11-4 in Gillingham's favour, statistically, it looked like a closer game than it looked to the naked eye. That was just my opinion of the football match. I thought we were the ones getting into better areas, Reece. We were the ones that were not working the keeper. I don't think either keeper had a proper save to make, to be honest. But we were the ones that were certainly encouraging shots on target. There was a couple of big blocks. I know there was one big save from Savin. But did you just feel that essentially we were in control, probably aside from the first 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, I think the first 10, 15 minutes was a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen the other in terms of battles and 50-50s on the pitch. But I think from there, I think we started to get a foothold again quite early on, and we were looking like the ones getting into more dangerous final third positions. We weren't as clinical as I'd like to have been yesterday. I'm sure we'll allude to that later on. But I did think we got Accrington on the back foot quite quickly. And we were causing them problems in the final third. I think, actually, in fairness to Accrington, they dealt with a lot of the stuff in the final third as well relatively well, I have to say. I thought they were doing okay at the back line. But we looked like the team that were kind of going to be the ones that were going to score 2 or 3 in this game. So I think we looked comfortable for the most part of the game. I wonder if Gary probably has a different perception. I'm not sure, but...
No, of course. So this is... What did you make of it, Gary? You must have been fairly encouraged by the first 10 minutes. You had a lot of balls, certainly, again, not in terms of making Jake Turner do loads of work, but in terms of territory and possession. You were playing the game in our third. I think you had a couple of corners. There was a couple of deliveries from around our 18-yard box. You must have thought, yeah, we look all right here. We're keeping the ball. We're pinning Gillingham back, because obviously you're going to be aware of that we've beaten Southampton in the week. So the first thing to do as an away side, coming to a club who's still riding this crest of a wave at the moment of the takeover 8 months ago, would be, right, let's get on the front foot, let's keep the ball and shut the crowd up.
Yeah, I thought, the stats sort of said it was sort of more or less 50-50 possession. I think you had the edge. But then you looked at the passes in the final third or something, and you absolutely wiped the floor with us. Again, it was a percentage, so I don't know whether that was because you have 2 more passes than us or 20. It's always difficult to. But I felt honours were pretty much even at the end of the first half. You had the edge. You'd had more. There was more going on in our final third for you than there was in the Gillingham final third for us. We'd had a couple of half chances. I think Sean McConville I think the commentators thought he'd mishit it. Sort of tried to side lob the keeper, I think. But not a lot going on. So yeah, I'd agree. It was probably a typical away team performance. Just try and absorb the pressure, be comfortable on the ball, and try and poke your way through with some sort of long passing or take advantage from a set piece. So I wouldn't say we were sitting back. I don't think we were comfortable sitting back. And we had that, like you say, that spell. I think it ebbed and flowed. There was good phases of opportunity for both sides. So you had the edge definitely in the first half, but only just, and that was more as you'd expect from an away fans point of view. I think that's what you'd expect. Bearing in mind, we're not, if you like, a well-drilled team yet. Although those players have played together and will have played with the majority of the others, they're not a week in, week out 11 who have had a good end to the season like you guys have. If anything, they've had a disaster the previous season, and they're still sort of trying to find a way, I think. And John and Jimmy are trying to find a way for them as well. So fair comment from you guys there, I think. Yeah,
and looking at I've got the stats for the first half. It was 51-49 in terms of possessions. There was not a lot in it. 6 shots total for the Gills, 5 for Accrington, 2 on target to 1. One of them obviously was decisive, and we'll get to that shortly. So yeah, I think the first half was very much of a muchness, and it was probably the second half where we were constantly got into good areas. But let's have a look at the timeline of the game. I've sort of tried to remember. I've used social media, Twitter feeds as a guide. We've mentioned the first 10 minutes. Accrington were having the better of it without really working Jake Turner, and then tried to give us a helping hand, Reece. I think there was a poor back pass for the second game in a row. I mean, we remember the lad Tuesday who nearly nearly scored from about 40 yards because the keeper's on him edge of his own D and he got it wrong. But yeah, Tom Nichols got there. And I want to ask your two perspective of this because I was a long way away in the Rainham end and it was down in the Brian Moore stand. Nichols got there in front of Savin, clipped it round him, went over. There was sort of half shouts for a penalty. What was your view, obviously, because you're watching it from a horizontal perspective, whereas I'm having to look all the way down the pitch. For me, I didn't immediately think pen.
If he gives a penalty for that, then I'm going to say to Accrington fans that's a really poor decision because Nichols was what he was hoping for. He was hoping Savin would clip him, and what Nichols forgotten is that Savin didn't. But Nichols still pretended that he was clipped. Actually, there's a part of me that went, I am quite surprised the ref didn't teeter with a yellow card for it because there was an element of simulation to it. I think he wanted to get hit, Nichols. He wanted to go down. But I think he over-anticipated it a little bit too much and did end up on the floor, but there wasn't anything in it. So from my perspective, initially, when it went out the ball out of play, I thought the keeper made a save first. I thought he got the ball first. And then when the referee gave the goal kick and nothing else, I thought, it's always quite hard in that situation because you think if that's the case, surely Nichols should be done for simulation. Maybe the referee saw it as he was sort of naturally going down anyway, but I don't think he was. So for me, it was quite a weird situation. But for me, definitely not a penalty.
A question to you then, Gary, because Reece thinks maybe there could be a card brandished to our centre forward, which I understand, but I've had this chat hundreds of thousands of times. I remember Gareth Bale years ago for Tottenham when he first burst onto the scene and constantly got booked for diving, and he'd say, well, hang about, does it have to be a penalty or a yellow card? Can it just be neither? Because Tom Nichols is travelling at pace. He's potentially, like Reece says, preempting some contact. So he's aware that he might take a whack. So does taking evasive action automatically mean he should be cautioned? Because I don't think he rolled around and was screaming in front of the referee as well. So did the referee come to the correct decision on both parts? I think we're all in agreement it's not a penalty, but I'm not sure I agree with Reece and think that Tom Nichols should be cautioned because he's travelling at speed. If he gets whacked, he's potentially getting hurt. So he's just trying to get out the way of what he thinks is going to be a whack from a keeper who's going to come and clean out everything if he does.
Yeah, I agree there. I think it's all about what happens after the initial sort of, I don't want to call it a dive, but all strikers are anticipating the impact. So there's always a tendency to fall into a stuntman role, shall we call it. But then if he's sort of rolling around, holding his leg, pretending he's, I mean, you see some players not even holding the right part of the body when they're trying to kid the ref. And then he's running after the ref and everything. Then, yeah, that's a yellow card because you are quite blatantly trying to lie to the ref about what went on. If you've just gone over maybe a bit theatrically, but then you just get up and get on with it, I think maybe the ref could have a word and just say, all right, don't make too much of things like that, otherwise I might be forced to give you a yellow card. But we see it week in, week out anyway. Players go down and there'll be a bit of sort of they're there on the knees with their hands out going, surely referee. And that's probably just about the boundaries of where we could go on dishing yellow cards out, I think. But if all players anticipate the impact and as a consequence there'll be some sort of let's say dive is the wrong word, but the sort of half anticipating that impact, and that's the problem, and that's where it's difficult for refs to really start brandishing unless it's constant every time somebody goes near them. There were worse occasions of simulation than that during the game, so no yellow card for me. That was I think that worked out all right for both sides really.
I think then after sort of that, I think that was around the 10th, 11th minute. Then there was sort of 15 minutes of both teams having shots, but from distance or scuffs or that sort of thing, or dragging things wide. I've written down a few. I think there was Sean Williams' free kick, which he got horribly wrong.
Yeah.
It went into the Brian Moore stand, Reece. There was I think Sean McConville had an effort that sort of took a nick and looped up to Jake Turner. It was comfortable. Sean Williams then had another half volley from the edge of the box that ended up in the back of the stand again. And then came the winner on the half-hour mark. And I'm going to ask Gary about John Coleman's comments regarding this at the end of the show. But Jake Turner kicks out of his hands. I think it's Naderson challenges with is it Bagaloo, the centre half, the number 3, or it might have been Kelvin Miller. I'm not sure. Just trying to remember now. But Naderson's got his body between the defender and the ball. I think the defender's then trying to hook his leg round Naderson to clear it. He gets something on it, but not enough. From there, Reece, I think it's a really good piece of play from Tom Nichols. He could have a touch and get his head up, but I think he anticipates that Naderson's quick and on the shoulder of that centre half who's off balance. First time cushion ball into an area that's dangerous for Accrington's perspective, and Naderson then uses his pace. And for all the pace that he's got, the finish then seemed to take an age to go in. It was almost in slow motion, like someone had pressed the slow button on your Sky remote or something like that. Then there was the anxious look to the flag, but it was given. Ashley Naderson started brilliantly for us. But at the time, I wasn't sure there was a goal coming. I'm not going to lie.
No, it was a flash out of nowhere, because it's out, it lives with the consistency. It was a massive long ball forward by Jake Turner. We'd done some lovely, it was a scrappy play at least. There was a lovely passing from both Accrington and Gillingham throughout that half an hour to a certain extent, and then this big lump forward comes out of nowhere. And because I know Accrington were playing from the back quite a lot. They were taking the short goal kicks and working it forward there. So to get a classic Route 1 goal where Bagaloo just didn't get quite his clearance right, but I've got to say the reaction to Nichols passing a really nicely weighted ball through for Naderson was really beautiful to see. And I know it's funny because Naderson, when we signed him, people were raising the eyebrows, going, "Oh, that's not what we expected." Very underwhelmed by this signing. But I think maybe one of the things that a lot of fans may have missed is that we're not just buying a decent League Two player. What we're actually buying into here is someone that has a chemistry already built of a player we have, and that, in this example here, shows how valuable that is in that particular phase of play, because Nichols knew exactly what Naderson was going to do in that situation and put in a ball perfectly for him to run onto to knock it past Savin, and ultimately was the goal and the winner of the game. But it just goes to show that chemistry between Naderson and Nichols is really, really strong. And that investment of those two up top is, I think, going to be very valuable to us throughout the season.
Someone literally the row behind us as they were celebrating, and it sort of all calmed down in the rain. I mean, I just heard the words "made in Crawley." It was absolutely spot on. They both played with each other for years, and you're right in terms of our transfers. I know Max Clark's Northern born and bred, but Stevenage, Connor Masterson, QPR. I'm trying to think of Shadogi, Leighton Orient, Malone, Millwall. Bon has been sort of no further than Ipswich in his career. Leighton Orient, Charlton, QPR, all London. So we've got players that are familiar with the area, which I think has helped them bed in a lot quicker than potentially if you've got them by people from far-flung corners of the UK. After the goal, we had another good chance, Gary, and this is probably where your keeper came to the fore as much as at any time during the game. There was a corner got played in, and I'd said throughout the game that I thought our corners were all just a little... To me, it felt like we were just trusting the wind to help us out with the corners. They were just sort of being clipped, and then let's see what the elements do to help us out. I just wanted us to drive some into that sort of 6-yard box and make it a bit more difficult. But this one, I think it took a couple of sort of pinball-style bounces and fell to Robbie McKenzie. I do apologise, Robbie. It wasn't Ashley Naderson, as I said on the Matchday Live. McKenzie makes a brilliant contact, Gary, and I thought Savin done really well to get out and make himself really, really big and save with, I think, his chest or his arm or his hip or something. But a really good stop. He took one for the team there because he could take that in the face, and I thought it was a really smart and brave stop to keep the score at 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, Toby's he's a great keeper. He will go on to play for at a higher level. And there's a little bit of baggage at the moment. I think after our Leeds third round FA Cup tie against Leeds, was it third or fourth round? There was a lot of praise for him. Obviously, been on telly live. He'd had a good game, and it may have just sparked a bit of interest. I don't know if he has an agent, but his agent's probably got in his ear. And I think he said some things around the club, and it kind of went against him for the rest of the season. He ended up going on loan to Stevenage for a short while.
Which goalkeeper didn't?
Sorry.
Which goalkeeper didn't last season?
And we started calling him Agent Toby after that because I think he let something like 4 goals in on his first game, which is great. Not for Toby, but with Stevenage, fantastic, getting pommeled, and we've had a part to play in it. So, yeah, he's a good keeper. I think he'll play. I think he'll play at championship level easily. He's still only young. I think he's 22, maybe 23, and that was typical Toby. What you saw there, brave keeping, great shot stopper.
22 years old. Yeah, I've just checked.
His positioning is getting better as he goes on. He does have a tendency to find himself rushing out somewhere where he'd have been better staying, on his line or in the box. But that's youth for you, and I think he does. It's a new defence. Jay's been there, Bagaloo's been there a couple of seasons, but was injured most of last season. So he's coming into a new setup than he left when he got injured. And yet they are, you can see there's a bit of naivety there with them, but they are gelling quite quickly. And Toby's a part of that. Probably needing to shout a bit more at times. You can see that 2 players are going for the ball, more than once or twice in a game and things. But he has got pedigree. I think he will go on to play at a higher level, hopefully with us. But I think, there'll be teams out there who will very soon be looking to bring him in, certainly as a second keeper at a higher level, if not a complete replacement. He was keeping James Trafford out two seasons ago, and James Trafford ended up going to Bolton on loan for about 18 months, and now he's at Burnley, having sort of won the Euros and now got a £19 million price tag. So
yeah, he made his debut, didn't he, Friday night against that who's that striker who might be half decent when he gets a bit older, that Haaland fella. He seems like he's a bit of a prospect. It's interesting what you said about communication there, though, because there was a couple of times during the game, and I said they just need to talk, the Accrington players. I think there was one occasion first half, you were shooting towards the Rainham end. The ball got played from sort of your right back area, and we were block 3, which was this side of the goal, and it came over. And I think your left back or your left sided midfielder could have just either volleyed it towards goal or back across goal into a dangerous area. And I think it was Andrews. Sort of, he was backing and trying to get it, and they just didn't talk. And I think one of them flicked it out for a goal kick. And you see one of them go, "You didn't tell me." And then a couple of times it sort of happened in the second half where 2 midfielders would try and jump for the same ball. But that'll come with time, I'm sure, and playing with each other more and getting used to the way that Coley wants you to set up. Half time came and went, though, and I think aside from the goal, both teams would have been fairly contemporaries with what was going on. It wasn't a poor performance by either side. I think what we had to realise as a fan base was it was not going to be the same type of game as Southampton was on Tuesday. And I think that's probably played a part in why it took us 10, 15 minutes to adjust to how the game was shaping up. Second half started. For me, it was just full of half chances, certainly in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes. I've not got loads of notes for the second half. I think there was Sean Williams for us, tried to curl one that he just never came back. It just kept going in a straight line. Josh Andrews had a header, but he was heading it on the way down, Gary, and it sort of drifted out for a goal kick. Scott Malone diving header, looked like it was slightly behind him, might have had a bit of contact as well. I think he took a whack in the face. That went wide. Nolan free kick. I wanted to ask you about your view on this, gents, because from our end, it was miles away again. To me, it looked like Jake Turner had it covered if it was going inside the post, because for me, it looked like he pulled his hands out of the way. But, social media likes to dress chances up to be a little bit better. Like, I think Gills have said that the Sean Williams effort was inches wide of the post. And I was, a lot of it... I mean, how many inches are in 2 foot?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a
typical male thing,
best,
isn't it?
right?
Yeah, how many inches and that type of thing. Like, I'm talking about snow, you dirty sods.
At least he didn't say centimetres. That would have been pushing it. So keep it imperial.
And then I think the last one was, again, Andrews, I think, for Accrington was edge of the box, but dragged it horribly wide, didn't make a proper connection.
It was a scrappy affair the first 20, 25 minutes. And What I found really interesting, I think when they came out in the second half, I don't think both teams knew exactly how to approach the game, because it was quite a scrappy affair. I have to say, there were moments where I thought Accrington gave the ball away really cheaply in the middle of the park. But then we only created half chances from it. So, you could say that we were quite sloppy in our approaches forward in the first sort of 20 minutes of the second half. And I just thought that both teams found it really hard to get a foothold in the game. And it was going to take like an absolute worldie or a set piece for there to be a second goal. And actually, as the game, and you'll probably talk about as the second half goes on, one of the biggest risks for me, us not getting the second goal, was I could see Accrington finding a way, just getting a set piece, had a couple of free kicks deep in our half at some point, and I thought it only, put a ball in a box, anything can happen, and that's what was really worrying to me, is that might have come to fruition with Accrington nicking a goal near the end or at some point in the second half, because even though we looked, as the half progressed, more likely to score, the fact that we didn't just left the door wide open for Accrington to try and nick a point at the death. And that was, for me, really, really concerning throughout that whole second half.
What did you make of it, Gary? Because I was sat there in the Rainham end, and I was sort of between the proverbial rock and the hard place of, I've been scarred by watching the Gills for the last 30 years. So then I'm thinking, yeah, we're definitely going to concede and cock this up somehow. But then the other side of it was, this is a new Gillingham. This is a resolute Gillingham with better players. There's a positive vibe. We've been comfortable throughout. Now we're going to see this out. Did you ever feel like that moment was coming, that you was really going to cause us a problem to maybe nick an equaliser, and then if you got it early enough, potentially go and try to win the game? Or did you just feel that it was a kind of a nearly performance from an Accrington perspective?
Yeah, I think it was almost like they started the second half it was almost like it was still 0-0. And both sides were giving each other a little bit too much respect. Nobody was completely committed. And I felt the longer the game went on, I felt our chance was just going to come from, a stray ball bouncing off a defender's backside or something like that. Even though we changed it quite, I think about 60 odd minutes in, we did what seems to be our usual trick at the moment of bringing quite 65th minute, minded players on.
You brought on Longello Adedoyin, him of penalty shootout fame, if you've not seen it on social media.
Classic,
and Sean Wally, they all came on the 65th minute to replace Nolan, Andrews and McConville.
Yeah, I mean, Andrews, it seems to be a typical sort of substitution pattern that we're doing at the moment, just to freshen it up. They all had something a little bit different. Hills, although we play a target man, I think Hills is our only true target man. He's big, he's strong, he can head a ball. The others don't really fit that role. We had Tommy Lee trying to fulfill that for us at the first start of last season, so we got a bigger guy in, and that's not the way he plays either. It's but needs, must, and everything. We didn't have a lot of good cover. But yeah, it just felt like there wasn't, the only way a goal was going to come was like a worldie free kick, or if some mistake was made and pounced on. And I don't think there was enough going on for a mistake to be made. You'll have to excuse me. There's a wrestling match going on in here between my two dogs, and they're making a right racket. I don't know.
I can't hear them. It's fine.
All right. Well, that's okay. It's a bit distracting though. One of them will jump up on my knee in a minute, but yeah, it was. It was like I said. It was like it was still 0-0, and each team was still trying to pick the way into the game, which was very strange, considering one of us were away from home and 1-0 down, and at some point we were going to have to do something if we were going to get anything out of the game. But maybe they were hoping to be another 20 minutes injury time, and they got a pace.
I have notes on that. I have notes on that as well. Yeah, I think you both summed it up, because my next set of notes says the game just seemed to drift from about the 60th to the 80th minute. Nothing really happened aside from substitutions, whether they had more of a negative impact and broke the rhythm of the game up more than sort of enhancing any team's performance potentially. We've all said the game felt like the second goal was only going to be a worldie or an error. that error nearly came from Bagaloo, who had a pretty torrid second half, I think it's fair to say. He tried to shepherd the ball out for a goal kick, Reece, didn't he? And I think Max Eagle was alert and managed to hook it back into a dangerous area. Ashley Nadesan does absolutely everything right. Good side foot. It's brilliant defending from the covering centre-back, I think it is. Or it might have been the left-back that had tucked in. From there, though, George Lashley has to hit the target bare minimum, surely.
Oh, it's one of the most frustrating moments watching it, because I really want Lapsley just to break through this kind of barrier, because everyone's kind of underwhelmed by his performances of late. And I just want him to have a moment where he maybe scores 1 or 2 goals, maybe gets an assist or gets a man of the match performance. And he wasn't going to do it yesterday because he came on as a sub. But in a moment like that, I think he's got a little bit too excited with the goal right in front of him. And he's got too much adrenaline running as well. And he's absolutely blazed it over the bar. For me, you need to have a little bit more composure there, and maybe you need to sight for that in the right or the left hand corner, whatever way you're going to.
That's what I said. I thought he should have side footed it. He looked like he could. He had a lot of goal to aim at to bend it into that corner rather than trying. And you can see he was leaning back, and it probably comes too soon after he's come on, doesn't it? If he'd been on 10, 15 minutes, I think we probably see that hit the target and potentially go to 2-0.
But to give him a little bit of forgiveness and a concession, like when Nadesan took the shot, I think it was blocked by Hills, and when it goes to him pretty quickly, he has to make a decision, because he could take a touch. Let's be honest, and then maybe the play slows down, and if he misses that, we go, why don't you take it first time? But he's got to make that decision there and then pretty quickly. But I'm sorry to say again, as a professional footballer, I think the decision that you got the goal in front of you, you're an attacking midfielder. That for me is an opportunity. That's meant to be your prowess, your trade is meant to be there. And I just think, unfortunately for him, he just obviously has missed the target. And if that goes in, I think we're talking about a game where we've won comfortably, which is interesting because we're talking about 1-0 here, and that's an Accrington could have got back into it with an error or a worldie of a goal. But if we went 2-0 up, the team are probably a little bit more relaxed, and maybe we see the game out a little bit more straightforwardly. I don't know, but that's kind of what, if that goes in, it changes the complexion of the game entirely, in my opinion.
Comes back, Gary, doesn't it, to what we said at the beginning? The game, if you look at the statistics, aside from the total shots, looked very close if you just look at bare numbers. But what would have been your perspective? Say Gills had scored with that opportunity. Do you think 2-0 would have flattered us, or would you have said that's a fair enough reflection of the game?
No, I think it'd have been fair enough. And I think that's been the case in the previous 2 of our games, really. With a close draw against Bradford by the penalties. And we beat Newport 3-0, but for a long time it was 1-0. And it was a similar sort of game to yesterday. So we then did score another and then scored another. So, next news, you're 3-0. You look like you've given someone an absolute panning, but it probably doesn't tell the whole story. I think if Gillingham had got a second one, you might have got a third. I don't know if heads would have dropped. We weren't really responding to being 1-0 down that well, so we wouldn't have responded. It wouldn't have been, we're 2-0 down. We really have to play. I think the mood was set. So you were the better side. It's that'd be my conclusion. Anyway, you just did what you had to do, and 1-0, 2-0, 8-0, doesn't matter really. You still get 3 points, and we go home, dropping a few places in the league.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Obviously, goal difference might come into play at the end of the season, but it's not the be all and end all at the moment. And final part in terms of the time frame of the game was, I just wrote, nothing really happened again. Final 10 minutes. I never, to repeat myself, I never felt like we were under the cosh. You see these games normally and you think, we're 1-0 up. We might drop a bit deep. Accrington are going to take off a centre-half, bring on 2 strikers or whatever, and take off a holding midfielder, as well, and really have a go. But Accrington's game plan for me, Reece, didn't seem to change. It was just the same patterns and the same sort of hope that a chance might fall to them from a corner or a free kick, or someone might whack one in the top corner. But it never really happened. And again, it was that rock and hard place for me. But I started sort of leaning towards we're comfortable here. They're not gonna nick this goal.
I was for most part until there was a moment. I think in injury time, or just leading up to it. I think Coleman exposed his inexperience and his age, because he had a few opportunities to clear a ball down right in the corner, and he struggled to do so. And as a result of the play, I think Accrington got a free kick on the right-hand side with about a few minutes to play. And it was just one of these moments where I'm thinking, yeah, we've done really well to get into this position. Yeah, we probably should be 2-0 up at least. But I still think, yeah, we were relatively comfortable, but there were still a few elements where I'm thinking, it only takes a ball into the box from a mistake in defence, a bad tackle, mistimed tackle, with someone on the back foot a little bit, and then all of our hard work's unravelled in one moment. And I was just, even though I felt like we were going to see the game through, I'm maybe not as, I don't know, I was actually not as confident as you leaning that side, but there was an element of me, maybe I'm still reminiscing from last season a little bit, I don't know. But I did think that there was still an option, that vulnerability in the centre of the park. With Accrington got a free kick, they might create something. And it was only when the final whistle went is when I had that sense of relief that we'd finally pull through. But I be honest, wasn't that comfortable, but I think that's because of the history of the club over the last few years, if I'm totally honest.
Like I said, we've been scarred, haven't we? I do remember the point, actually. Now, yeah, I've missed that off. I remember Coleman had it edge of his own box, didn't he? And I think Nichols and Bond were both in acres of space, and they could have just had it to feet, and we could have turned and ran. I think we was probably 2-on-2. But yeah, he just sort of hacked it into an area, and it went straight to an Accrington player. But yeah, luckily we didn't get punished, because I think that would have been unfair on Ethan Coleman, who's been very good.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to stay with you, Reece, for a second, because I want to ask you about Accrington and what you thought of them.
Yep.
I think it's fair to say it's a typical John Coleman side, big target man. Go to that front man early and play from there. He's had success doing it for 2 decades and more. We saw how it worked when we had Steve Evans in charge, and I think it's fair to say that Neil Harris can be fairly direct at times as well.
Yep.
Who stood out for you in terms of Accrington over the 90 minutes?
Over the 90 minutes, I'd say, is it your captain, Connelly? Is he your captain? Do you know what, right? Because he's holding the centre of that park. He's orchestrating the whole game. I just, the composure and the drive to try and get everyone working together. It just felt he was, if I wanted to find out information about Accrington's tactics, he's a guy I'd go to, because he seems to know everything and committing to the way that Accrington want to play. He was just the glue in the centre of that park. I was really, Connelly was a kind of, if he was at Gillingham, I'd be pleased. I thought he was a really solid player in the centre of the park for me.
Absolutely. We're a different side when he's not playing. I've said he's the most important player ever for Accrington Stanley, considering the level we played at for the last 5 years, and he was part of getting us there. He's been club captain for so long, and last season he missed a lot of games. Tony had a great starter. It'll been Phil. Phil's the stat man on the Across the Pitch podcast, but we won something like 16 games last season, and Keneally played in 15 of them. We only won once when he wasn't there. We lost a lot of games with him as well, but I totally agree with what you say. He's the manager on the pitch, basically.
Yeah.
And we're definitely a different side, a worse side without him quite often.
And to back that up with some statistics, he played 90 minutes. He had 65 touches, completed 63% passes, 100% dribble success rate. It was only 1. But still, 100% is 100%. 8 out of 10 ground duels, he was successful. 6 out of 7 in the air. So in terms of that combative out of possession side of the game, he was very, very good. And yeah, I totally agree with everything that you two have said. I think he probably was the standout. I thought the centre forward tried to put himself about, but you could see he's very inexperienced, and there's aspects of the game that he needs to learn to be able to do it in a more refined way, if you can be that type of player in a refined way. But I just thought he was very naive in a lot of his decision making. And he sort of had to play on the back foot a little bit because he got that silly yellow card, which we'll talk about in a little while. Gary, similar question to yourself. In terms of Gills, who stood out? But first of all, what did you make of us? Because there's a lot of hype around Gillingham now because of the takeover and the start we've had. I think we're the only side in the division to not concede. Do you see Gills staying up there? I know we're third in this very embryonic table. Do you see Gills being a real threat to the top 3 places, or at least the top 7?
Yeah, I mean, the fact you had a great end to last season, that squad has been kept, and you've added to it with some very good players who've played at higher levels. You controlled the game, I think, yesterday for the most part, which is the important thing. And like the England ladies team at the moment, you're winning. It doesn't matter how people are coming at you. You're winning, and if you can keep that going, avoid injuries. We've seen the frailties of the supposed big guys of Stockport, Notts County, and Wrexham. They can be beaten, so it'd be interesting when you guys come up against them. And I think, you know, all credit is due. You were the better side on the day. I think physically you were better than us. You know, your players are stronger. There's a lot of young lads who are still developing in our side and our squad. And that told, I think, in certain one-to-ones and what have you. There's a naivety about our side. It plays like an under-23 side at times, and it did for a large part last season, where they almost expect to get the ball and not be challenged and then allowed to pass again. And it's like, no, it's the big boys league now. You have got to be quicker. We're not as quick as John Coleman's sides usually are. Yes, he uses a target man, but they can play some great football at times, and it just needs certain players to click. Tommy and Jack, Tommy Lee and Jack Nolan, they are two of those players, but they've played together for a long, long time outside of Accrington. And the guys, they socialise together, they live together. So there's a good connection there. Gillingham have that sort of... the dogs are at it again. Gillingham have that going on with more than two sets of players because they've got that longer standing sort of relationship in the side, and they've come from a bad place to a good place. We are trying to get back to a good place from a pretty horrendous place last season. So
this is my question. You remind me of us at this stage last season, because I spoke to Tony about this. I said all the teams that came down out of League One season before last didn't finish higher than 13th. So there's going to be that period, that hangover type period of time where you've got to discover how to win football matches again, haven't you? And consistently win football matches, because you didn't do it over a 46 game period, which is why you've ended up being relegated.
Yeah, I think, was it Martina Navratilova said something like she forgot how to lose at one point in her career. And that's where you need to be. That's when it runs. If you can forget how to lose, that's a fantastic place to be in. But yeah, it's infectious, is winning just like losing. And you guys are carrying that over. The summer hasn't altered anything. It's strengthened your squad. And some of the proposed challenges that we felt might be there might not be as strong. I mean, it's a long season, it's early days, but you guys sure will be there or thereabouts. You'd expect to be in the playoffs, if not challenging higher up, really.
Exciting, isn't it, Reece?
It is. I'm just hearing an opposing fan say that is... Yeah, I have to get used to that a little bit every now and again.
That's why I asked, because I know we talk amongst ourselves as a fan base, and we're trying to, and I know Neil keeps trying to temper the enthusiasm. So I'm thinking, if we can get it from an outside perspective who thinks we're going to be a threat, then you might start believing, not the hype, I don't like using that word, because it's 180 minutes out of a 46 game season. There's a long way to go.
You do realise that's the kiss of death now. I said there's no way we'd get relegated last season. So
I said we'd finish 8th last season, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Couple of questions surrounding John Coleman's interview, and I've not had a chance to watch Neil Harris's yet, so I'm going to come to you first, Reece. He's spoken in his interview about Gills being direct, which I've got no issue with per se. But it just came across to me as if he was saying it like we were direct and Accrington are not. So I've written down, and I say this half in jest, pot kettle black, because Accrington, I think it's fair to say, are a very direct team at times as well, like we are. But I thought our performance was more than just about being direct yesterday. The way Coleman's insinuated is that's how we were a threat. I thought, like the chances second half, the Mackenzie one where Johnny Williams flicks it over the fullback with the outside of his foot, and that goes across the goal. The Malone header comes from a good passage of play where we passed through Accrington. There was other opportunities where we passed through them and got into the final third. I just thought that was a bit of a lazy comment. I'm not going to lie, from John Coleman. Harry can jump on me as well. It's fine. I've got no issue with that.
But is he? This is. I'm just as an alternate viewpoint. Could he not be saying that he was surprised that that maybe we were a bit more direct than he initially thought? Maybe he thought we were never going to be direct whatsoever, and maybe he's gone, well, they were a bit more direct than what I anticipated. I don't know. It's just another viewpoint. It's probably unlikely, but it is a little bit more of a throwaway comment because I don't know. I don't think we were direct at all. I thought well, we were direct in some instances. I mean, the goal came from a direct place. Let's be honest. But like you say, I mean, put it this way, Malone had an excellent game yesterday. He looked great. And was that because he was pumping balls forward over the top of the midfield? No. He was putting some decent balls in. He was getting some dangerous positions at ends of crosses, and he was trying to do some good link-up play, good passing play. So to say that we were direct, unless he was specifically talking about the winning goal, I think it would be unfair to say that we are 100% a direct team. And Accrington, as we saw yesterday, were a similar team in that sense as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of either lazy or throwaway comment that I don't think was that reflected of the game and for both teams as well.
There was an 8% difference between successful long balls for both sides. Ours was slightly higher, but we did attempt more. I've got no issue with that. I'm not saying we're not direct, but I just thought that, and I don't know if you've listened to it, Gary, and you can give it a different perspective because you know John Coleman more than we do. It just seemed that he was trying to say that we were just one-dimensional. That was all we had to our game over the 90 minutes.
No, I usually find myself putting stuff on social media, and I haven't seen the interviews at the end of the game with John. And very often I'm saying exactly the same things he is. So I do see the game from his perspective, I think, which is, I don't know, quite unusual because a lot of fans don't seem to do that and go at odds against John. But pretty much your comments there, but maybe what he meant or what he felt at the time. Obviously, we've said it's just after the game. The microphone's in your face. You've lost.
Totally understand.
You want to go in there and kick some ass, kind of thing. And he's trying to think, well, how do I finesse this? But maybe what he meant was Gillingham had more success with the long ball. Yes, you did other things as well, but the successful or the more prominent attacks or whatever seemed to be when you were more direct. And he felt maybe it was a backhanded compliment. Your best success came when you were more direct, because that's stuck in his mind as that's the threat we're under. We can cope with the fancy passages of play and what have you. We seem to sort of snuff them out potentially. And it was when the ball was getting in there, we were like, rabbits in the headlights. Maybe that might be what was behind the comment, rather than you're just like a one-dimensional team and that's all you've got. Having said that, you only scored when you were more direct, so that's all.
Oh yeah, totally get that. And to be fair, he did say that usually you deal with being turned around better, so I get that. So I'm assuming that's a reference to if teams try and go over the top of you, turn around and defend really well. So maybe I've heard it wrong, but I just thought it was because I thought we did a lot of stuff really well that didn't end up in goals, and then suddenly it looks like a very different type of performance would be my point. He also made one comment, and this is definitely for you, Gary, because I know Reece was saying it wasn't a foul. He said he thinks there's a foul for the goal.
Yeah, maybe that's the angle. He was at the other side to the camera. Now I saw Bagaloo comes out and the ball sort of hits it looked like it hit his thigh or literally his backside, comes back out to the Gillingham player, who then Bagaloo's committed. There's a hole in defence. The scorer runs into that space, or is left in that space. Actually, I don't think he had to run anywhere initially. And then the
scorer that's the one that challenges with Bagaloo from the initial kick downfield. But I can't see.
Whether he thought it was a push or some sort of tangle going on. But I wasn't shouting, "Oh, that's a free kick," and I will scream at the slightest chance.
Like we all do
in front of the telly or in the back of the crowd, and the ref.
I screamed penalty when Nichols went over from the back pass.
So Yeah, sometimes different angles. I could imagine if you're on the manager's bench, I think the camera was directly opposite, but you're lower down. There's other players inside, and maybe he felt Bagaloo's positioning was a bit unnatural. He was kind of side on when the ball hit him, and maybe he just thought there was, unless it was some other part of the play that we haven't seen, maybe off. It couldn't have been off camera shot. I mean,
I can't see it being anywhere else other than the two players that are involved in the goal, because it's literally that big punt over the top of everyone else, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a proper ball watcher in those situations, so I'm not usually watching. It's better live when you can see what's going on off the ball a bit easier. The TV just focuses you into that central spot, and I didn't really see anything, but I could maybe understand where from different angles in the ground it could look like something odd's gone on, just because of Bagaloo's positioning when he has contact with the ball, maybe.
Quickly then to you, Reece. I know I'm conscious of time, and we've only got about 5 minutes left before you need to go. For me, it just looked no more than Naddison had got his body between the ball and the centre half, and the centre half's then trying to reach round him, which is why he looks off balance and allows the space to then open up for Naddison to eventually run into.
Yeah, for me, I'm quite surprised that this conversation exists, because when the goal happened, I didn't even cross my mind there was any sort of breathing room for a foul at all. I thought it was just a phase of play where, I think you said that, Gary, where Bagaloo was slightly positionally, his body was out of position. And then as a result, I think that opened up space for Naddison. I really like how you phrased that. He was left with space rather than ran into it. Yeah. I think that's exactly what happened, actually. But for me, I when I did the live video myself, and when I actually watched it back, even then, it didn't even cross my mind once that there was any infringement at all. So, and again, I think it must come from the angle you have from the manager's bench. There must be something you see or potentially miss-see, or something we can't see from the camera side, So, and it's all about that perspective. But from my perspective, and I think, Gary, you watched it on the iFollow as well, is that right?
Yeah. Dodgy link.
Yeah, exactly right.
Thank for that.
Maybe John Coleman was watching your link then.
Yeah, maybe right. Yeah. But for me, from my perspective, and what have been Gary's as well, there was I didn't see any wrongdoing whatsoever.
No, my view was from straight down the pitch, and I didn't see anything either. So I had a fairly good sort of parameter of viewing it of anything that would have been going elsewhere. So, and I certainly didn't see anything. I know, like Gary said, we all tend to ball watch because that's what we're there for, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, it baffled me, that comment. And like I say, I wouldn't have even balled it up if I'd not listened to Coley's interview this morning before recording. One last question. We've got last couple of minutes because Reece is going out. I think it's going to be something that comes up on every episode for at least a couple of months with the new directives and the new rulings from the referees. There were two very soft yellows in the game yesterday. One after about 2 minutes for Dom Jeffries for standing in front of a free kick and stopping Accrington taking it. There was one then, I think, where Josh Andrews did exactly the same. Ironically, I think he'd applauded the referee for giving a yellow card to Dom Jeffries and then protested that he'd got one for doing exactly the same thing, which always makes me laugh. In a nutshell, correct decision based on the rules, all agreed?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, again, Andrews he sort of dribbled the ball and nutmegged the guy in front of him. The guy who was fouled was still on the ground. I don't think it was wasting time, but you can't. It's got to be black and white, this rule, and it can't drift. If that's what's going to happen, then players just walk away from the incident, say nothing, get on with the game, and that's what we want. We don't want 10,000 players around the referee and the ball getting hoofed into the crowd, because it happened quite a lot to us last season and nothing was done about it. So it's a big part of getting the game focused on just the football and not the pantomime around it.
Yeah, I just want to amplify that and say, it's because the thing is, when you introduce a harsher rule or a new rule into football, in this case it's a harsher rule, I think there's this transitional period where players are going to get a lot of yellow cards or things like this because they're used to playing it how they were seasons previously. So there's going to be this buffer zone where players are going to get booked for things like this quite consistently. and over time it will start to peter out a little bit, I think, where players realize they can't do that and will just walk away. But for me, like you said, Gary, it does eliminate the fact that players are surrounding the referee, potentially putting a lot of pressure, unnecessary pressure on referees to make decisions as well. And as a result, I think from a fan's perspective, it improves the quality of football and improves the quality of the game in the long term. So for me, I was quite happy those decisions were made yesterday, and for me, it was absolutely right.
I think the one thing they can do to give more play time back into the game is get rid of the stupid offside rule where the linesman can't flag until the offending player then touches the ball. I know that's the point where under the new rules, that's the point where the infringement has been committed, but it can be, there's all that needless running, needless confusion. Just put your flag up if he's offside like they did in the old days, and we'll get half an hour a game back because of that. Probably there's been maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but if we're looking at minutes here, there's a lot of time wasted, and it just confuses everybody and creates. I suppose it creates talking points, but that would be one thing I'd say. If you're going to improve the flow of the game, stop it when it's meant to be stopped.
Two things from me before we finish. Number one, Gary, I totally agree. I've said it. This new rule's ridiculous. It's going to take someone getting hurt before they go, hang about, we need to flag and stop the game, because you're getting this where, the flag's gone up, player keeps running, someone crunches into a tackle, then the flag goes up. It's going to take someone getting a broken leg before they go, we need to look at this. Secondly, you notice there, Gary, you're new to this. Reece joins me every week. He jumped on me there because I was talking about referees, and he knows I like to bash officials, but he didn't let me finish because I've actually said,
go on,
give the referee credit. At least he was consistent and was doing the same thing for both sides. Reece isn't used to me doing that. He thinks I just bash referees all the time for the same. I still think there needs to be common sense, because players, coaches, fans are all getting used to the new directives. So I think maybe they could have gone, oh, wait, the new rules, you're not meant to do that. Do it again and I'll give you a yellow card. But at least he did it for both sides. I'd have got the raging ump if he'd gone, Dom Jeffries, there's a yellow, and then he'd given a warning to Josh Andrews. So I've got no issue with him doing the same for both sides.
I would have got a raging ump as well with that. That would have annoyed me. So
that's what you often see, that inconsistency. Most people complain about the inconsistencies. If you're going to be rubbish for both sides.
That's literally it. We get used to them being pony. As long as they're pony for both teams, I've got no problem at all.
Exactly.
Right, gents, I think we've covered everything. It's been really good fun. It's about an hour again that we've got our teeth stuck into. Gary, really appreciate your time. It's brilliant to do this with opposition fans and get their perspective of proceedings, because like we've already said, we all have slightly rose-tinted glasses on when we're talking about our own team. So it's an interesting addition to this show, I think, and Reece agrees. And it's been brilliant to pick your brain, and listen to your stories about your father, how he got Accrington back into the professional fold. So thank you and appreciate your time, Reece.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
Good stuff. Reece, we all know all about. Go and follow him. Go and watch his match day video from the weekend. It's all good fun. He's still sitting in that sort of weird Jumanji type studio.
Yeah, I think one of the things I might get a Gillingham flag just to put over this panda enclosure back here, because people have already made a couple of comments about it, so I might have to change something about it.
I'm just concerned. Gary's got dogs fighting. I'm just worried you're going to get taken away by like a lion or something at some point during the show. We'll be back Tuesday for another match day live. We are going to Sutton away. I know Reece will be doing his show from the comfort of his armchair as well, so there'll be plenty of content throughout the week. We then start looking forward to next weekend. It's a trip to Crawley, who have started fairly well. Everybody's tipped to be relegated have picked up 4 points from their opening 2 games against good sides, so we'll be looking to speak to a Crawley fan ahead of that game, and of course we'll be rolling into next Saturday for another match day live down in Sussex. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and up the Gills.